So last week was something else. We were all told that peace was right around the corner in the Middle East. But what we actually got was a wild look into modern conflict, a story where, stock tickers seem to matter just as much as tanks, and a war of words proved to be incredibly powerful.
So you really have to ask, was this a real move for peace, or was it something else entirely? President Trump announced a ceasefire, but as we're about to see, the reality on the ground was telling a completely different story.
And this is the core of the whole thing, right? On one hand, you have the White House saying everything's on pause, but on the other, bombs are still dropping, missiles are still flying. It's this huge gap between the official story and what was actually happening that kicks this whole thing off.
All right, so let's break down the official story coming out of the White House. What exactly was promised, and who was it promised to? Because the details here, well, they're super important. Now listen, the specifics here are everything. This wasn't some big, sweeping ceasefire. No. The promise was incredibly specific, a 5-day pause on attacking only Iranian power plants. And that's a huge distinction, right? It leaves a ton of wiggle room.
And if you thought that was strange, it gets even weirder. When he was asked, hey, who'd you make this deal with? The answer was just incredibly vague. He mentioned a very respected person, but never gave a name. So that left this giant question mark hanging over the whole deal. Who was actually on the other side of this thing?
Okay, so the announcement is made, and then, boom. Almost instantly, all the other key players involved start saying, no, that's not what's happening. The whole story just starts to fall apart as denials start pouring in. First up, and this is a big one, you have Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. He doesn't mince words. He basically says, we're not stopping anything, which completely torpedoes the whole spirit of a ceasefire.
Then Iran chimes in and they come in hot. Their parliament speaker doesn't just say, nope, no talks happened. He throws this bombshell out there. He says this is all fake news, designed to mess with the financial and oil markets. And wow, that just changes the whole way you look at this so-called ceasefire.
And this gets back to that clever wording we talked about. See, Israel could argue, hey, we're not breaking the deal. Why? Because Trump only mentioned power plants. They were hitting missile and nuclear sites. Totally different. It's this massive loophole that basically makes the whole ceasefire completely useless.
And look, Iran's denial wasn't just some random comment. It was everybody. We're talking the foreign ministry, the powerful Revolutionary Guard, the parliament. They were all on the same page, all saying the same thing. There were no negotiations, period.
Okay, so if this whole thing wasn't really about stopping a war, then what was it about? Well, that accusation from Iran about the markets, that takes us down a totally different rabbit hole. We need to follow the money.
Right, so let's forget the battlefield for a second and think about the global economy. Because if the goal wasn't actually peace, then you have to ask yourself what other crisis was happening right at that moment. And the timing here is just perfect. Right before this announcement, the financial markets were in a free fall. Oil prices were shooting through the roof, the dollar was tanking, and everyone was starting to whisper the R word, recession. It was not a good scene.
Then he makes the announcement, and literally within minutes, everything flips. Stocks, crypto, they shoot up. Oil prices, a huge deal for the economy, start to drop. Whether the ceasefire was real or not didn't matter. The announcement itself had this massive, immediate impact on the economy.
And that brings us right back to what Iran was saying. All of a sudden, their claim of market manipulation doesn't sound so crazy, does it? The theory is that the idea of a ceasefire was used as a tool, not to stop bombs, but to stop the bleeding on Wall Street.
But here's the thing. Whether this was intended for peace or for the markets, it had very real, very dangerous consequences. The fallout from this phantom ceasefire actually created a new and even more dangerous situation for everyone.
So instead of a pause, what did we get? An escalation. Israel kept bombing, Iran fired back, hitting Tel Aviv and even a target in the UAE. This ceasefire literally did the exact opposite of what a ceasefire is supposed to do.
And the damage was huge. U.S. credibility took a nosedive globally. There was even infighting, with Trump pointing fingers at his own defense secretary. And the craziest part? The real irony here is that Iran, by just calling the whole thing a lie, actually came out of it looking stronger. And that leads to a really dangerous place. See, with so much of its infrastructure and leadership hit hard over time, Iran doesn't have a lot left to lose. So now its biggest weapon is just its ability to create chaos, especially by messing with global shipping lanes. And that actually gives them a weird kind of leverage.
And people noticed. The press all over the world was all over this, talking about how badly it damaged America's reputation. I mean, think about it. When both your allies and your adversaries are calling you out in public, that's a really bad look. It leaves a mark.
So it leaves us with this one last kind of wild thought to chew on. Have we entered a new kind of battlefield? One where a single press release can have a bigger impact than an entire army? Where the real wars are fought not with missiles, but with market-moving words? It's a pretty interesting and maybe a little scary question to think about.